The Ohio Ordnance Works 1918 A3-SLR, or BAR to me and you, a classic 30-06 semi-auto rifle. We're going to go through the disassembly and basic maintenance of this so you at home can keep yours running for a long, long time. The first thing we're going to do, as with any firearm, is remove any source of ammunition, magazine release here in the front of the trigger guard, and then pull the bolt back and visually inspect our chamber. Unlike the real BAR, this is a closed bolt weapon, so it will not lock open when I pull the bolt to the rear. The first thing we're going to do when we go to disassemble the BAR is disengage the gas tube retaining pin. In the field, in the military ones, it was designed to use a cartridge tip in this little detent, but you can use anything that you can use to disengage this, like a screwdriver, punch, or other flat. All you want to do is lift up on this slightly and push it towards yourself. So you're going to swing this all the way down. It will leave a mark on the receiver. That is just the nature of the beast. We do have some tips for you later on how to avoid that. Once you have that spun all the way out, you can pull this out of the receiver, keeping of note that there will be slight spring tension forward because the piston is resting inside of the gas tube. The next thing I'm going to do is stand the rifle up as the easiest, pull the charging handle back, and hook my thumb around the back of the receiver to hold it, and then just gently lift straight out and pull the gas tube and handguard assembly off. There is a heat shield, stamped metal heat shield inside the handguard. It is not retained by anything other than its own fitment into this wood here. So sometimes it will come loose, just slide it back into place. I'm going to gently let my piston forward, making sure that I do not knock the piston head against the gas block assembly. Once I've done that, I have to disengage the disassembly pins on the trigger pack as well. They're built in a similar fashion to the gas tube pin, where they have that little dimple that you can use a cartridge tip or a screwdriver to lift gently out of their pocket and swing them downward. Once you swing them downward, you can pull them straight out, set them aside, and the trigger housing group will lift out of the receiver body. Keeping of note that you want to have the gun in the cocked position. If the hammer is forward, it will fight you the whole way out of the gun. From there, we're going to remove our recoil spring and guide. To do that, we'll take our thumb or forefinger, I find thumb the easiest, put it on the back pad of the recoil guide, putting my hand over the slide assembly so that I can control that spring, because it is going to be under some tension and I don't want it to flop out of the gun or kink. I'm going to push in forward slightly, turn, and pull that out, setting that aside. From there, I have a hole in the side of the receiver wall, and I also have a small hole in the charging handle. I'm going to pull backwards slightly, and I will see a pin appear in this window. I will use a punch, cartridge tip, or anything I can press in that hole to push that pin through the hole in the receiver. Once I've gone past the charging handle, I can pull that out, and then I can keep pushing on that pin, and it will slide out that hole in the side of the receiver. That is a very John Browning design. From there, I can push the slide rearward. It is now separated from the bolt. In the back of the slide is a small U-shaped piece called the cocking piece that I find easiest to push forward and catch on my little finger. From there, I can pull the slide out the front of the receiver and set it aside. Next, using a screwdriver flat, a coin if you have one, or in the field it was intended to use a cartridge rim, I'm going to lift up on this little square, the bolt guide, grabbing my bolt tail, and I'm going to lift the bolt straight out of the receiver. From there, taking note, the extractor is on the side of the bolt here. It is under spring tension. And this piece here we call the secondary firing pin, has a solid pin that retains it to the bolt. It is not retained by any spring or anything, so it may fall loose when you take it out of the bolt, but just set it right back in where you found it. You want to make sure that the firing pin moves freely and doesn't bind up. That is the complete disassembly of the 1918A3-SLR or BAR. General maintenance on this: punch the bore out, use any cleaners or solvents. It's not going to be sensitive. It is a phosphated finish. The bolt is just a natural stainless finish. Making sure you wipe off the bolt face, clean off the piston, and then lubricate the sidewalls of the slide in particular. They are going to be what's riding in that gun and controlling everything. Also making sure to lubricate your spring and guide rod. That'll keep the gun running nice and smooth. For reassembly, we're going to start with our bolt. We're going to set the bolt face down and then lay it down over that bolt guide. You can pull the bolt guide outward with the tool like you did before, but it is bevel cut to allow the bolt to lay down on top of it. If you hear that bolt drop in underneath the bolt guide, you can push it forward and let it rest in the locking area. Next, I'm going to take my slide and I'm going to put it in from the front, slide it all the way to the rear. Take my cocking piece, I'm going to set it on my little finger here, and I'm going to use this to control it and set it back into that slide. I can reinstall my charging handle just by riding it up the boss on the side of the receiver. I'm going to pull my operating group forward until I see in that sidewall the hole in the side of the slide appear. I'm going to start the pin through the slide, line it up with my cocking piece, and then grabbing the secondary firing pin on the back of the bolt, lifting it up and sending that pin back through all of the components. And I've now locked the entire group back together. Next, we'll return our spring and guide rod into the receiver. I like to use a piece of cardboard that I tuck between the slide and barrel. That really helps me get that in there easier, because this spring, when the gun is new especially, can be quite a bear. But I'll set the spring underneath the receiver bridge through the magazine well, slide it forward, starting it into that piston shank, pushing forward. Once the guide rod has passed by this bridge, you know that you've gone far enough without any tension. If the spring guide stops back here, you probably have an obstruction in your piston you need to clean out. But what I'll do is I'll put my thumb on the pad, pinch the spring against the sidewall of the slide, pushing forward. And once I've got it all the way forward, I will use my fingers to guide the spring center line into that piston. Once you've got the spring inserted, make sure that the flat of the guide is flat with the receiver. And then from there, we can go ahead and stand our rifle up, pulling back on the charging handle, getting our handguard and piston assembly, and setting it over the piston and guiding it downwards onto the piston itself, making sure that we catch the gas block and gas tube together. And then I'm going to go ahead and get that gas tube pin and start it. Let my bolt forward. Set my rifle down. I'm going to take my trigger pack, making sure that my hammer is in the cock position. And I'm just going to set it back in the receiver. And then I'm going to line up my trigger pins. From there, I can go ahead and push these up into the receiver. The edge here is going to lock underneath the charging handle boss, and this little detent will click into a little recess on the sidewall of the receiver. like so. This one has a small key right there that has to be all the way down against the receiver to catch. And I'm just going to rotate it all the way up until it locks. As I mentioned before, these pins will leave lines on your receiver wall. If you want to avoid that, a couple techniques we have developed is I like to take the backer from a Magpul sticker, of which we have plenty of them from our machine guns and the H-car, and I use that backer and tuck it underneath that pin, and I'll let it ride over that receiver without leaving a mark. I also know some people will use a piece of ribbon or a zip tie, tuck it underneath that, and pick it up with pliers to hold the pressure away from the receiver wall. Once I have all of that back together, I'm going to take my BAR, set it on safe, make sure that the gun does not fire on safe, put it on fire, pull the trigger, make sure I get a nice loud click, charge it to make sure that my trigger resets, press the trigger again and hold it, charge it again, and then hear that audible reset of the trigger to function check my rifle and make sure everything is working how it's supposed to. That's going to complete the reassembly of our BAR. We are all set to liberally apply ammunition and go shoot it. Thank you for watching. If you have any other questions on your BAR or any of our other products, you can go to ohioordnanceworks.com or email us at sales@oowinc.com. Thanks again.